The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Sergeant Roy adjusted his rifle scope and scanned the horizon. His squad of 8 soldiers had been walking the same patrol route for 3 weeks now, checking the outer boundaries of the human colony on Kepler 442b. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Elisa, the squad's medic, wiped sweat from her forehead as she climbed over a fallen log. "Still nothing out here, Sarge," she called softly into her radio. Behind her, Tom carried his demolitions pack with practiced ease, while Alex had found a good vantage point on a nearby ridge to watch their flanks. The communications officer Ben was constantly monitoring radio chatter from the colony, listening for any signs of trouble. Marcus hefted his heavy plasma cannon, looking almost disappointed that they hadn't encountered anything worth shooting. David, their engineer, was busy checking his scanner for any unusual energy signatures. Don, the newest member of their team, stayed close to Roy, still learning the ropes. What none of them knew was that 50 light-years away, the massive Corvani Third Fleet had already begun its journey toward their small world. Commander Dex stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing intelligence reports about the human colony. The reports described it as a simple mining outpost with minimal defenses and perhaps a few hundred inhabitants. "This should be an easy victory," Dex told his officers as they gathered around the tactical display. "Our scouts report only basic defensive systems and no military presence. We will land, secure the mining facilities, and add another world to our empire." His confidence was shared by the 200,000 troops aboard the 50 warships of his invasion fleet back on the planet. Roy's squad continued their routine patrol, completely unaware that they were about to become the only thing standing between their colony and total destruction. They moved through the dense forest with practiced efficiency, each soldier knowing their role and position without needing orders. The Corvani fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their massive ships casting shadows across the small planet below. Dex immediately ordered long-range scans of the surface, looking for the best landing sites and any potential threats. The scans showed exactly what he expected: a small colony with basic infrastructure and no military installations. "Begin the landing sequence," Dex commanded. "Deploy the first wave to secure the mining facilities. This world will be ours within the day." Thousands of landing craft began launching from the fleet, filled with heavily armed Corvani soldiers ready for what they thought would be an easy conquest. Ben's radio crackled to life with an urgent message from the colony. "All units, we have multiple unknown contacts entering the system." "Large fleet detected. Repeat." "Large fleet detected." Roy immediately signaled for his squad to take cover and prepare for possible contact. The first Corvani landing craft touched down in a clearing just 5 kilometers from Roy's position. Hundreds of alien soldiers poured out, their blue-scaled skin glistening in the sunlight as they formed up in perfect military formation. Their weapons were advanced and their armor looked impressive, but Roy had seen enough combat to know that equipment alone didn't win battles. "Looks like we have company," Roy whispered into his radio. "Ben, get word to the colony that we have hostile forces landing in Sector 7. Tell them to prepare for invasion." His squad immediately spread out into defensive positions. Using the natural terrain to their advantage, Alex found a perfect sniper position on a rocky outcrop and began counting the enemy forces. "I count at least 300 hostiles in the first wave. Sarge, more landing craft coming down every minute." His voice was calm and professional, the result of years of training and experience. Tom began setting up his explosives along the most likely approach routes, using his knowledge of the terrain to create deadly surprises for the advancing aliens. "I can slow them down, but we need to pick our battles carefully," he said, as he placed charges under a narrow bridge. The Corvani forces began their advance toward the colony, confident in their superior numbers and technology. They moved in large formations, following standard military doctrine that had worked on dozens of other worlds. What they didn't know was that human military training emphasized adaptability and individual initiative in ways that alien militaries simply didn't understand. Roy watched the alien advance through his binoculars and began formulating a plan. 8 soldiers against hundreds seemed impossible, but he had been trained to think differently. Instead of trying to stop the entire force, he would hit them where they were weakest and force them to react to his movements. "Listen up," Roy said, quietly into his radio. "We're not going to stop this invasion with 8 people, but we can make them pay for every step. Alex, start picking off their officers. Tom, blow the bridge when they try to cross. Everyone else, prepare for hit-and-run tactics." The first engagement came when the lead Corvani unit tried to cross the narrow bridge over a deep ravine. Tom waited until they were halfway across before detonating his charges, sending dozens of alien soldiers tumbling into the rocky depths below. The explosion echoed across the forest, announcing that the humans were not going to surrender without a fight. Alex's rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times, and 3 Corvani officers fell dead before their troops even knew they were under attack. The alien formation immediately began to break apart as soldiers sought cover, their careful advance turning into chaos. "Target their communications equipment," Roy ordered as he fired at what looked like a command post. "If we can disrupt their coordination, we can keep them off balance." His shot found its mark, destroying an alien radio array in a shower of sparks. The Corvani forces had expected to face perhaps a few dozen militia members with basic weapons. Instead, they found themselves under attack by what seemed like professional soldiers who knew exactly how to exploit their weaknesses. Every time they tried to regroup, another soldier would fall to Alex's sniper fire. Commander Vex received the first casualty reports with growing confusion. His forces were taking heavy losses, but the scouts couldn't identify the source of the attacks. "How many defenders are we facing?" he demanded from his communications officer. "Unknown, sir. The attacks seem to be coming from multiple directions, but we cannot get an accurate count," the reply only added to Vex's frustration as he watched his carefully planned invasion begin to fall apart. Roy's squad moved like ghosts through the forest, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the undergrowth. They used their knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of the alien forces, always choosing the time and place of engagement. It was exactly the kind of warfare that humans excelled at, but the Corvani had never encountered anything like it. As the sun began to set on the first day of invasion, Commander Vex found himself staring at casualty reports that made no sense. His forces had lost nearly 1,000 soldiers, but they still hadn't seen their enemies clearly. Whatever was waiting for them in the forest was far more dangerous than his intelligence had suggested. The night would bring new challenges, and Roy's squad was just getting started. The second day of fighting began before dawn when Roy's squad struck at the Corvani supply convoy that was bringing ammunition and medical supplies to the front lines. Tom had spent the night setting up a complex series of explosives along the supply route, turning what should have been a safe journey into a deadly trap. The convoy of 12 vehicles was traveling through a narrow canyon when the first explosion rocked the lead transport. The blast sent the heavy vehicle tumbling down the rocky slope, its cargo of weapons and ammunition scattering across the ground. Before the other drivers could react, more explosions erupted along the entire length of the convoy. Marcus opened fire with his heavy plasma cannon from a concealed position on the canyon rim, his shots punching through the thin armor of the supply vehicles like paper. Within minutes, the entire convoy was either destroyed or abandoned, leaving the Corvani forces without the supplies they desperately needed back at the landing site. Commander Vex studied the tactical reports with growing alarm. The casualty figures showed that his forces were losing soldiers at an alarming rate, but his scouts still couldn't provide accurate intelligence about the enemy they were facing. Every patrol that went out either came back with heavy losses or didn't come back at all. "Sir, we need reinforcements," reported Colonel Vex, one of Vex's most experienced officers. "Whatever forces the humans have stationed here, they are far more capable than our intelligence suggested. I recommend calling in additional fleets immediately." Vex nodded grimly as he studied the battlefield map. Red markers showed the locations of his fallen soldiers, and there were far too many of them for what should have been a simple occupation. "Send word to Admiral Koros. Tell him we need immediate support. This is not the easy victory we were Promised Roy's squad had spent the night moving through the forest, using their knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of the alien search parties. They had captured several pieces of Corvani communication equipment during their raids, and Ben was working to decode the alien language and understand their tactical communications. Their command structure is completely confused, Ben reported as he listened to the intercepted radio chatter. They keep asking for casualty reports and troop positions, but nobody seems to know what's happening. They're using words that translate to ghost soldiers and phantom attackers. Alex had found a new sniper position on a hill overlooking the main Corvani camp. Through his scope, he could see hundreds of alien soldiers moving around in what looked like barely controlled panic. Officers were shouting orders while troops scrambled to fortify positions that had been overrun during the night. They're bringing in their heavy weapons, Alex reported. Looks like they're setting up some kind of energy cannons around the perimeter. They're definitely scared of something. The Corvani forces were indeed scared, though they couldn't understand what they were afraid of. Every standard military tactic they tried seemed to fail against an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't find their targets, and their advanced weapons were useless against opponents who struck from the shadows. David had been busy during the night using his engineering skills to sabotage the alien equipment they had captured. He had rigged several Corvani weapons to explode when fired and planted them where retreating alien soldiers would find them. The resulting explosions would add to the confusion and make the aliens even more paranoid about their own equipment. Third day brought the arrival of Corvani elite stormtroopers, the Empire's most feared military unit. These soldiers were larger and more heavily armed than the regular troops, with advanced armor and weapons that could punch through solid rock. Commander Thex was confident that they would finally be able to deal with whatever was causing his problems. Roy watched through his binoculars as the stormtroopers deployed from their landing craft. They moved with the precision of elite soldiers, their formation tight and disciplined. But Roy had fought elite units before, and he knew that confidence could be a weakness if it wasn't backed up by adaptability. They're moving in formation toward the colony, Roy reported to his squad. Looks like they're planning a direct assault? Tom, do you still have those charges set up in the narrow pass? Tom grinned as he checked his detonator. Been waiting for someone important enough to use them on. These stormtroopers are about to get a very warm welcome. The elite stormtroopers entered the narrow pass with complete confidence, their sensors sweeping for any sign of the mysterious defenders. Their armor was designed to protect against the most advanced weapons, and their training had prepared them for every possible combat scenario. What they weren't prepared for was Tom's engineering expertise. The explosion that rocked the pass was unlike anything the Corvani had experienced. Tom had spent 2 days calculating the exact placement of his charges to bring down the entire canyon wall, and the result was spectacular. Thousands of tons of rock crashed down on the stormtroopers, burying the entire unit under an avalanche of stone and debris. The shockwave from the explosion could be felt at the Corvani base camp, where Commander Thex watched in horror as his most elite unit simply disappeared from his tactical display. The stormtroopers who had been advancing through the pass were gone, crushed under tons of rock in a trap that had been prepared with almost supernatural precision. How is this possible? Thex demanded from his officers. The stormtroopers were our best soldiers. They had the most advanced equipment and training. How could they be defeated so easily? None of his officers had an answer. The human defenders seemed to know exactly where to strike and when, always staying one step ahead of the Corvani forces. It was as if they could predict every move the aliens would make, turning the invasion into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Admiral Koros received a distress call from Commander Thex just as he was preparing to invade another human world. The message was brief but alarming. Heavy resistance encountered. Elite forces eliminated. Request immediate reinforcement with additional fleets. Enemy capabilities far exceed intelligence estimates. The admiral stared at the message in disbelief. The Third Fleet was one of the most powerful military forces in the Corvani Empire, and Commander Thex was one of their most experienced leaders. If he was asking for reinforcements, The situation must be truly desperate. Troy's squad had been fighting for 3 days now, and the strain was beginning to show. Gon, the rookie, was starting to look exhausted, and even the experienced soldiers were feeling the pressure of constant combat. But their hit-and-run tactics were working better than anyone had expected. "We can't keep this up forever," Lisa said as she treated a minor wound on Marcus's arm. "Sooner or later, they're going to bring in so many troops that we won't be able to avoid them." Roy nodded as he studied the tactical situation. The Corvani forces were becoming more cautious, but they were also becoming more desperate. That desperation might make them more dangerous, or it might make them more likely to make mistakes. Either way, his squad would have to be ready for whatever came next. The night brought new challenges as the Corvani forces launched flare attacks to try to illuminate the forest and find their hidden enemies. The bright lights turned the darkness into an eerie landscape of shadows and glare, making it harder for Roy's squad to move unseen, but the flares also revealed something that made Commander Thex's blood run cold. In the brief moments when the forest was illuminated, his spotters could see clear evidence of the devastation that had been inflicted on his forces. Destroyed vehicles, abandoned equipment, and the bodies of hundreds of his soldiers were scattered across the battlefield. For the first time since the invasion began, Commander Thex began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The intelligence. REPORTS had described this world as a simple mining colony with minimal defenses, but the evidence suggested something very different. Whatever forces the humans had stationed here, they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The fourth day would bring new revelations that would change everything. The fourth day of fighting brought a tragedy that would change everything for Roy's squad. Don, the youngest member of their team, had been assigned to watch their rear while the others prepared an ambush for another Corvani patrol. The rookie had been eager to prove himself, but his inexperience showed when he failed to spot the alien scouts moving through the undergrowth. The burst of plasma fire that cut Don down came from 3 directions at once. The Corvani soldiers had finally learned to expect human tactics and had adapted their own strategies accordingly. Dan's death was quick, but it hit the squad like a physical blow. "Dan's down," Alex reported grimly through his radio. "He's gone." "Sarge, the aliens got him with a crossfire pattern." Roy felt something cold settle in his stomach. Don had been young and eager, the kind of soldier who reminded everyone why they were fighting. His death was a stark reminder that even the best tactics couldn't protect everyone, and that the aliens were learning from their mistakes. "We make them pay for that," Roy said quietly into his radio. "Alex, do you have targets?" The sniper's response was immediate. 3 of them, grouped around Dan's position. "They're moving to secure his body." Alex's rifle spoke 3 times in quick succession, and 3 Corvani soldiers fell dead before they could claim their prize. The loss of Don changed something fundamental in the squad's approach to the fight. They had been professionals before, but now they were personally invested in making the aliens regret ever coming to their world. The change was subtle but significant, and it showed in the precision of their next attacks. That night, Roy's squad launched their most devastating assault yet. They had been studying the Corvani command structure through intercepted communications, and they knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. The alien headquarters was located in a heavily fortified compound, surrounded by multiple layers of defense. Dom had spent hours preparing for this attack, using every explosive device he could salvage from the battlefield. The charges were placed with surgical precision around the compound's power generators, communication arrays, and ammunition storage areas. When they detonated simultaneously, the explosion lit up the night sky like a second synthesis. Not only the command center, but also eliminated 3 of the Corvani army's most senior officers. The chain reaction from the ammunition depot continued for hours, sending streaks of fire across the night sky as stored weapons exploded in a spectacular display of destruction. Commander Vex survived the attack only because he had been inspecting the perimeter defenses when the explosions occurred. He watched in horror as his headquarters disappeared in a ball of fire, taking with it most of his senior staff and all of his tactical planning equipment. "Sir, we have lost contact with all forward units," reported one of his surviving officers. The command network is completely destroyed. We are operating blind. The casualty reports that came in throughout the night painted a grim picture. The Kovani forces had lost over 40,000 soldiers in 5 days of fighting, with another 20,000 wounded or missing. The numbers were staggering, especially considering that they still hadn't gotten a clear look at their enemies. Admiral Koros arrived with 2 additional fleets just as the sun was rising on the 5th day. His massive flagship cast a shadow over the battlefield as he surveyed the devastation that had been inflicted on the 3rd Fleet. The sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had expected. Commander Thex, report, the Admiral demanded as he reviewed the tactical situation. What exactly are we facing here? Thex looked exhausted as he tried to explain the impossible situation. Sir, our intelligence was completely wrong. The human forces on this world are not simple colonists. They appear to be elite military units with advanced training and equipment. They have been using tactics that our military doctrine has no answer for. The Admiral studied the casualty reports with growing concern. How many defenders are we facing? What is the size of their force? Unknown, sir. Our estimates range from a full regiment to an entire division, but we have not been able to get accurate intelligence. They appear to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology that makes them nearly invisible to our sensors. Ben had been listening to the alien communications all night, and what he heard made him laugh, despite the grim situation. Sarge, you need to hear this. They think we're some kind of elite special forces unit. They're talking about calling in orbital bombardment because they can't handle us with ground troops. Roy shook his head in amazement. They still don't know. There are only 7 of us left. How is that possible? The answer came from David, who had been analyzing the captured alien equipment. Their military thinking is completely different from ours. They rely on large formations and overwhelming firepower. The idea that a small unit could cause this much damage simply doesn't compute for them. Alex had found a new position overlooking the expanded alien base, where he could see the newly arrived fleets deploying additional troops. I count at least 3 more fleets in orbit. Sarge, they're bringing in everything they have. The irony of the situation was not lost on Roy. The aliens were so convinced they were facing a major military force that they kept escalating their response, bringing in more and more troops to deal with what they thought was a massive threat. Each new fleet that arrived only confirmed their belief that they were fighting something far more dangerous than a simple patrol squad. Marcus had been working on a plan to use the captured alien weapons against their former owners. I figured out how to operate their heavy plasma cannons. If we can get close enough to their new positions, we can turn their own weapons against them. The plan was audacious even by human standards. The squad would infiltrate the alien base, capture several heavy weapons positions, and use them to attack the alien forces from within their own defensive perimeter. It was the kind of plan that would either succeed brilliantly or get them all killed. Tom had been preparing for this moment all night, rigging explosives throughout the alien base using their own equipment. I've got charges placed on every major structure. When we make our move, the whole place will go up like a fireworks display. The attack began at dawn, when the alien guards were changing shifts and their attention was focused on the routine of military life. Roy's squad moved through the base like ghosts, using the aliens' own uniforms and equipment to blend in with their surroundings. The first sign of trouble came when Marcus opened fire with a captured plasma cannon, sending devastating shots into the alien barracks. The explosions that followed were spectacular, as the heavy weapons tore through the alien structures like paper. Alex provided covering fire from his sniper position, picking off alien officers as they tried to organize a response to the attack. His shots were precise and deadly, each one eliminating a key target and adding to the confusion. The aliens' response was immediate but disorganized. Troops ran in all directions, some trying to reach defensive positions while others fled in panic. The idea that their own base could be infiltrated and attacked from within was so foreign to their military thinking that they had no Effective response bombs explosives began detonating in sequence, turning the alien base into a series of fireballs. That could be seen from orbit. The chain reaction continued for hours, destroying equipment and supplies that had taken months to transport to the front lines. By the time the attack was over, the Kovani forces had lost another 15,000 soldiers, and most of their heavy equipment. The psychological impact was even greater than the physical damage. As the aliens realized that nowhere was safe from the mysterious human defenders, Commander Thex stood in the ruins of his second headquarters, staring at the devastation with something approaching despair. "Admiral, I request permission to withdraw. We cannot continue this operation without taking unacceptable casualties." Admiral Koros was about to respond when his communications officer interrupted with an urgent message. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human forces. They are requesting direct communication with our command structure." The message that came through was simple and direct. "This is Sergeant Roy, Human Colonial Defense Force, Scout Squad 7. You are trespassing in human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. 7 soldiers, a scout squad. The massive Corvani invasion force had been decimated by 7 human soldiers on a routine patrol. The silence in the Corvani command center stretched for several long moments as Admiral Karos stared at the communication console. 7 soldiers, a scout squad. The words seemed to echo in the air like a physical presence, challenging everything. The Corvani military thought they knew about warfare. "Verify that transmission," Karos commanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Run it through every analysis system we have. Check for deception, psychological warfare, any kind of trick." The communications officer worked frantically at his console, running the human transmission through multiple verification protocols. Each test came back with the same result. The transmission was genuine, sent from standard human military equipment, and showed no signs of deception or manipulation. Commander Thex sat down heavily in his chair, his face pale with shock. "A scout squad," he repeated, as if saying the words would make them make sense. "We have lost 60,000 soldiers to a scout squad." The implications began to sink in throughout the command structure. If 7 human soldiers on a routine patrol could destroy an entire invasion fleet, what could an actual human military force accomplish? The thought sent chills through every officer present. "Sir," reported the intelligence officer, "we have analyzed the human transmission in detail." The soldier identified himself as Sergeant Roy, which indicates a non-commissioned officer rank. "Scout Squad 7 suggests this is a standard patrol unit, not elite forces." Admiral Koros felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Are you telling me that we have been defeated by ordinary human soldiers?" "It appears so, sir. Our analysis of their tactics suggests standard human military doctrine, not specialized warfare techniques. They were simply better at applying basic military principles than we anticipated." The news got worse as more reports came in from the battlefield. The human squad had been using captured Corvani equipment throughout the fight, which meant they had been learning and adapting to alien technology in real time. Their success wasn't due to superior equipment, but to superior thinking. "Get me a direct line to the Emperor," Koros ordered. "He needs to know about this immediately." Our entire strategic assessment of human capabilities was wrong. Back on the surface, Roy's squad was preparing for what they assumed would be a final desperate assault by the alien forces. They had revealed their true numbers, which meant the aliens would now know exactly what they were facing. The question was whether that knowledge would make them more dangerous or more demoralized. "Think they'll believe us?" Lisa asked as she checked her medical supplies. 7 people causing this much damage seems pretty hard to accept. Roy studied the alien positions through his binoculars. "Look at their movement patterns. They're not advancing anymore. They're pulling back to defensive positions. I think they believe us, and it's scaring them." The truth was even more dramatic than Roy realized. Throughout the Kovani fleet, panic was spreading like wildfire as the news of their situation became known. Officers who had been confident in their superior numbers and technology were now questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. If their scouts are this dangerous, One junior officer asked during an emergency briefing, "What must their actual warriors be like?" The question hung in the air like a threat. If human scouts could destroy entire fleets, human soldiers must be unstoppable. The logical conclusion was that humanity represented an existential threat to the Corvani Empire, and possibly to all alien civilizations. Emperor Vorth received the news on his throne world, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. The report from Admiral Karos was brief but devastating. The Third Fleet had been effectively destroyed by 7 human soldiers on a routine patrol. The implications were staggering. "How is this possible?" the Emperor demanded. "Our intelligence described humans as a primitive species with basic technology. How could they defeat our most advanced military units?" The Minister of War studied the tactical reports with growing alarm. "Your Majesty, it appears that our understanding of human military capabilities was fundamentally flawed. Their training and tactics are far superior to anything we have encountered." The Emperor began issuing orders immediately. "Recall all fleets operating near human space. Suspend all expansion operations until we can reassess the threat. I want every available resource dedicated to understanding human military doctrine." Meanwhile, the surviving Corvani forces on the planet's surface began a hasty withdrawal to their ships. The knowledge that they had been fighting only 7 enemies had broken their morale completely. Soldiers who had fought bravely against unknown forces now fled in panic from opponents they could finally count on. Watched the alien retreat through his scope and shook his head in amazement. "They're running away. Thousands of them are running away from 7 of us." The psychological impact of the revelation was devastating to the Corvani forces. They had been trained to fight against similar forces using conventional tactics, but the idea that such a small unit could cause such massive damage was beyond their comprehension. Alex continued to pick off fleeing aliens with his sniper rifle, but his heart wasn't really in it anymore. "It's like shooting fish in a barrel now. They're so demoralized they're not even trying to fight back." The retreat became a rout as Corvani soldiers abandoned their equipment and fled to the landing craft. Heavy weapons, vehicles, and supplies were left behind as the aliens rushed to escape from the planet's surface. The evacuation was so hasty that many units left their wounded behind. David was busy collecting abandoned alien technology, marveling at the advanced equipment that had been discarded in the panic. "They're leaving behind weapons that are worth more than our entire colony. This stuff is incredible." The human relief force that had been dispatched to help defend the colony was still 2 days away, but it was no longer needed. Roy's squad had not only held off the invasion but had actually driven the aliens away through sheer determination and superior tactics. Ben intercepted communications from the alien fleet as they prepared to leave the system. "They're calling this operation a complete failure. They're reporting that human space is defended by forces beyond their ability to counter." The message was being transmitted to every corner of the Corvani Empire, spreading the news of their defeat and the danger posed by human military forces. The propaganda effect was immediate and devastating to alien morale throughout their territories. Marcus was busy destroying the abandoned alien equipment that was too dangerous to leave behind. "Can't let them come back for this stuff later. Some of these weapons could destroy entire cities." The final irony came when the alien fleet finally departed, leaving behind a battlefield littered with the wreckage of their invasion force. The Corvani Third Fleet, one of the most powerful military units in their empire, had been completely defeated by 7 human soldiers who had simply been doing their job. Roy looked out over the devastated alien positions and felt a strange sense of satisfaction. They had saved their colony and protected their people, but they had also accomplished something far more significant. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Well," Roy said to his remaining squad members, "I guess we better write up our after-action report. Command is going to want to know what happened here." The report that Roy would eventually file would become one of the most important documents in human military history. It would be studied at every military academy and referenced in strategic planning for decades to come. But for now, it was just another piece of paperwork for a tired sergeant who had done his duty. The true impact of their victory would only become clear in the weeks and months that followed, as the news of their success spread throughout both human and alien space. The Battle of Kepler 442b, as it would come to be known, would change the balance of power in their region of the galaxy forever. The 7 soldiers who had achieved this remarkable victory had no idea that their names would become legendary throughout human space, or that their tactics would become the foundation of new military doctrine. They had simply done what human soldiers had always done. They had adapted, improvised, and overcome impossible odds. The panic that was spreading through the Corvani Empire was just the beginning. News of humanity's military capabilities would soon reach other alien civilizations, triggering a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed the newest members of the interstellar community. Captain Williams arrived with the human relief force 2 days after the Corvani fleet had fled the system. He expected to find his colony under siege, possibly destroyed, with survivors hiding in whatever shelters they could find. Instead, he found Roy's squad sitting calmly around their makeshift camp, cleaning their weapons and sharing rations. "Sergeant Roy," Williams said as he surveyed the battlefield, "what is your status?" Roy looked up from his rifle maintenance and shrugged. "All objectives secured, sir. Enemy forces have withdrawn from the system. We lost 1 man, Don, but the colony is safe." Williams stared at the devastation spread across the landscape. Burned out alien vehicles, abandoned equipment, and the remains of fortifications littered the ground for kilometers in every direction. "Sergeant, my intelligence reports indicated that you were facing an entire alien invasion fleet." "Yes, sir. That's correct. Corvani 3rd Fleet, approximately 200,000 troops in 50 warships. They landed about a week ago." The captain's expression grew more confused as he processed this information. "Sergeant, where are the rest of your forces?" "How many troops did you have defending this position?" Roy gestured to his squad members. "This is it, sir. Scout Squad 7, -1 casualty. 7 soldiers total." Williams sat down heavily on a nearby rock. In his 20 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. A single squad had defeated an entire invasion fleet, something that should have required at least a full division of troops. "How is that possible?" Williams asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "Standard operating procedure, sir. We followed the manual, used the terrain to our advantage, and kept them off balance with hit-and-run tactics. They never adapted to our methods." The after-action report that Roy filed would become the most widely read military document in human history. Every military academy would require their students to study it, and strategic planners would reference it for decades to come. The simple, matter-of-fact description of how 7 soldiers had defeated an alien invasion would revolutionize military thinking throughout human space, but the real impact of their victory was being felt far beyond human territory. Throughout the Corvani Empire, the news of their defeat was spreading like wildfire. Military commanders who had been confident in their ability to expand into human space were now questioning every aspect of their strategic planning. Emperor Vorth had called an emergency session of his war council, bringing together the most experienced military leaders in the empire. The topic was simple but urgent: how to respond to the human threat. If their scouts are this dangerous, General Kex reported, then their actual military forces must be nearly invincible. We must assume that any conflict with humanity would result in our complete defeat. The assessment was echoed by intelligence reports from across the empire. Every alien civilization that had encountered human forces was reporting similar experiences. Human military units consistently outperformed their alien counterparts, using tactics and strategies that seemed almost supernatural in their effectiveness. Recommend immediate defensive posture, advised the Minister of War. All expansion operations should be suspended, and our forces should be concentrated on protecting our core territories. The Emperor nodded grimly. Issue orders to all fleet commanders. Human space is off limits until further notice. Any ship that encounters human forces should withdraw immediately. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as other alien civilizations received reports of the Corvani defeat. The news that 7 human soldiers had destroyed an entire invasion fleet sent shockwaves through every military establishment in known space trade. Routes began shifting away from human territory as alien merchants decided that the risk of encountering human forces was too great. Diplomatic missions were canceled, and several alien governments began preparing defensive measures against a perceived human threat. The irony was that humans were completely unaware of the panic they were causing. Roy's squad had returned to their normal patrol duties, walking the same routes they had been covering before the invasion. They were puzzled by the sudden lack of alien activity in their sector, but assumed it was just a coincidence. "It's been quiet out here," Lisa observed as they walked their patrol route. "No alien traffic, no probe ships, nothing. You'd think they'd be more curious about us after what happened." Alex was monitoring long-range communications from his position on the ridge. "I'm picking up a lot of encrypted alien transmissions, but they're all moving away from our territory. It's like they're avoiding us." The truth was that the aliens were indeed avoiding human space, but not for the reasons Roy's squad might have expected. The fear that had gripped the galaxy was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human military capabilities. Human soldiers were trained to be adaptable, to think independently, and to use whatever resources were available to accomplish their mission. These were not superhuman abilities, but they were capabilities that alien military doctrines had never encountered. Ben had been monitoring alien communications for weeks, trying to understand the strange patterns he was seeing. "Sarge, I'm reading something weird here. The aliens are talking about us like we're some kind of unstoppable force." Roy paused in his patrol and looked back at his communications officer. "What do you mean?" "They're calling us the Ghost Warriors and the Shadow Killers. They're spreading stories about human soldiers who can appear anywhere without warning and destroy entire armies." The mythologization of human military capabilities had begun almost immediately after the Corvani defeat. Stories of the battle had grown in the telling, until Roy's squad had become legendary figures capable of impossible feats. Tom found the whole situation amusing. "They're afraid of us because we know how to blow things up and shoot straight." "Don't they have basic military training?" The answer, as human intelligence would eventually discover, was that alien military training was fundamentally different from human methods. Most alien civilizations relied on overwhelming firepower and rigid tactical formations, concepts that worked well against similar opponents but failed completely against human flexibility. David had been analyzing the abandoned alien equipment, trying to understand how their technology worked. "Their weapons are actually more advanced than ours, but they're designed for completely different tactical situations. They expect to fight in large formations against similar enemies." The abandoned alien equipment had become a treasure trove of technology for human scientists. The advanced weapons, vehicles, and communication systems were being studied and reverse-engineered, giving humanity a significant technological advantage. Marcus was using one of the captured alien weapons as he walked point for the patrol. "This plasma cannon is pretty nice, but it's too heavy for the kind of fighting we do." No wonder they couldn't keep up with us. The strategic implications of Roy's victory were still being assessed by human military leaders. The fact that standard human tactics had proven so effective against alien forces suggested that humanity had a significant advantage in any potential conflict. Captain Williams had forwarded Roy's after-action report to the highest levels of human military command, where it was being studied by strategists and planners. The consensus was that human military doctrine was fundamentally superior to anything the aliens had developed. "We need to be prepared for the possibility that other alien civilizations will try to test us," Williams told Roy during one of their debriefing sessions. "Your victory may have prevented one invasion, but it might encourage others." Roy nodded as he considered the implications. "We'll be ready, sir. If they want to test human soldiers, they'll find out the same thing the Corvani did." The confidence in Roy's voice was typical of human military personnel throughout the galaxy. They had no idea that their reputation had grown to almost mythical proportions, or that entire alien civilizations were reorganizing their military doctrines to account for the human threat. The Battle of Kepler 442b had changed everything. Though most humans were still unaware of the full impact of their victory. Roy's squad had saved their colony, but they had also fundamentally altered the balance of power in their region of the galaxy as the sun set on another quiet patrol. Roy looked out over the peaceful landscape and felt satisfied with their work. They had done their duty, protected their people, and proven that human soldiers could handle whatever challenges they faced. What he didn't know was that his name was already being whispered in fear across dozens of alien worlds, and that the tactical manual he had followed so faithfully had become the foundation of a new era in galactic warfare. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, not because humans were monsters, but because they were simply human, and that was terrifying enough.